The 1st of October 2012, around 7 p.m., 5-year-old April Jones is playing outside with her friend on the Bryn-y-Gog housing estate in West Wales. April wouldn't normally be allowed to be out quite so late, but the day before she had received a glowing school report, so her parents allowed her more time to play as a treat. Just 20 minutes later, April Jones would disappear, sparking a frantic search by volunteers and police investigators.
This emergency.
My dog's been kidnapped. I live in Bryn-y-Gog. Hang on, Sal, can you speak to them, please? Hello.
And what makes you think the dog has been kidnapped?
Apparently, she's gone off in a car with somebody. Somebody picked her up in a car or something.
Okay, what's the name of the child that's gone missing?
April Jones.
April, how old is she?
5.
We would like to take a moment to extend our sincere condolences to the friends and family of April Jones, who was taken from their lives tragically and very prematurely. After playing outside with her friend for around 20 minutes, it was time for April Jones to come home, but she did not reappear outside of her home. Her parents had last seen her riding a bike around 7 p.m. Wanting to know where she was, they went looking for her. Not too far away, they found April's 7-year-old friend, but April wasn't with her. The friend described how April had gotten into a vehicle. Thankfully, she was able to provide a description of the man who had taken April. She said that he had brown hair, a beard, and blue or green eyes, and was wearing a green jacket. Very perceptive for such a young girl. But one detail would prove to be very important. The young girl described how April climbed into his vehicle at the driver's side. Of course, vehicles in the UK have the steering wheel on the right-hand side. This must have meant that the vehicle the man was driving had a steering wheel on the left. It may have been evening, but the police had no time to waste. Within 8 minutes of the 999 call, the first officers arrived at the scene. As search teams were being assembled, police questioned anyone that knew April. They needed to know if anything out of the ordinary had happened that day or in the days leading up to her disappearance. None of the family could think of anything that could help the police. Earlier that day, April had been to her swimming lesson, then had come home, and just like any other child, she was allowed to go and play outside with her friends for a while. April hadn't been missing very long, but this was autumn, and the night was drawing in. Soon it would be dark, severely hampering efforts to search for April. News spread fast over social media and through word of mouth around the local community. Within hours, local people had come out of their homes to try and assist in any way they possibly could. Although well-intentioned, this actually made the job harder for police investigators. They were happy to have the help of locals in the search, but they also needed to conduct a door-to-door inquiry in order to see if anyone had seen April or the person who may have abducted her. The problem was, hardly anyone was at home. Most had gone to try and assist in the search efforts. As a result, the police could only make limited inquiries of those people when they returned to their homes. As is the case with most incidents like this, the press got hold of the story and this small town became the scene of a major media feeding frenzy, with journalists and cameramen from all over the country swooping in. By 10:30, police released an update to the public and the press, stating that they had still not found any trace of April, and they were becoming increasingly concerned, begging anyone who may have seen or knew anything to come forward straight away. April Jones was born on the 4th of April 2007. Although she was a happy little girl, April wasn't without her problems. She had been born 7 weeks premature, which led to a few issues in her early life. But with the help of medical treatment, she was able to overcome these and grow into a normal little girl. But one condition she couldn't get over was her cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is caused by an injury to the brain, either during or shortly after birth. The most common cause is a lack of oxygen to the brain. April had the condition from the hips down. Luckily for her, it was relatively mild, but this would have made basic muscle movements difficult and sometimes painful. But no matter how mild her condition, she still needed to be treated with care, and most worryingly, whoever had kidnapped her probably had no idea, and they may not have cared about her mild disability. On the evening of October the 1st, police released more details about April's disappearance. She was wearing a purple coat and her school polo shirt. By now, over 100 people had come out to assist the police. The locals knew the area well. Their knowledge could be invaluable in finding her. It wasn't just locals who came to help either. Many people from South Wales traveled up to help, as well as many volunteers from England who crossed over the border into Wales to offer their assistance. The search was not going to be easy. The town was surrounded by mile after mile of rugged terrain, including mountains, waterfalls, gorges, heavy woodlands, and uneven ground. Not to mention the fact that it was a cold, dark autumn evening with heavy rain pouring on them. Police had to coordinate all of the volunteers carefully to ensure that they themselves would be safe. An area of more than 60 square kilometers was now being searched by numerous teams of volunteers. 8 hours after the initial call to police, around 3:30 in the morning, volunteers had been trudging their way through the Welsh countryside in very difficult conditions. The circumstances were, of course, terrible, but there was a certain heartwarming poetic beauty that so many people were willing to give their time to help find little April. Something that must have given her distraught family some comfort as they waited by the phone for any news. The police had not allowed the family to go on the search operation in case any disturbing discoveries were made. On the 2nd of October 2012, after searching all night, there was still no sign of April. Welsh police now put out a child rescue alert. This is basically a general alert throughout the UK, asking police forces to ensure their officers had a description of April and the man who had taken her. It was the first time the child rescue alert had been triggered throughout the entire country. 14 hours after April had last been seen, the police were now coming under intense pressure from the media to release all the information they had. The police approach to the investigation was also being brought into question. It could be argued that criticisms of the police were unfair. They had arrived quickly, organized search teams, and had been out all night looking for April. Given the weather conditions and the dark night, there was little more that could have been done. Detective Superintendent Andy John was put in charge of the investigation and did start to give the press and public as many updates as possible. In addition, he also put roadblocks out, telling his officers to stop every vehicle that came their way. Missing persons posters were also displayed with a picture of April in hopes that it might jog someone's memory. The police had been receiving different reports from locals and people further away. Most of these reports, as is the case with this type of investigation, that is, until one name came up several times. Many local people pointed to a man who did fit the general description of April's kidnapper, Mark Bridger. Bridger was a local man who drove a Land Rover. He had short facial hair, blue eyes, and most importantly, his vehicle was left-hand drive. Different people reported seeing Bridger or his vehicle in the area at the time of April's disappearance. Bridger hadn't been in trouble with the police before and was not known by them, but they managed to find his last known address, which they visited over and over, but there was no sign of him or April Jones. Some locals even said that Bridger had been involved in the search for April on the first evening after she disappeared, although this could not be proven given the number of volunteers that were involved. Police had little to go on, and given local reports about Bridger and the fact that he seemed to have disappeared, they now focused all of their efforts on locating him. Helicopters flew over the area. Police searched everywhere and anywhere that he could be. They received information that Bridger had recently moved into a new cottage called Mount Pleasant. As police arrived, they could see no signs of life. There weren't any vehicles at the property. They entered the cottage, calling out April's name, but there wasn't any response. No one knew at this time whether he had been hiding out from police or not. But at 4:30, police announced that Bridger had been arrested. Earlier in the day, he had been spotted by a police helicopter walking his dog along a country road only a couple of miles from where April's family lived. It seemed that he had tried to alter his appearance, shaving off his beard and hair. The helicopter guided police patrol cars to his location. Police pulled over and asked the person his name. He made no effort to hide his identity. The police officer then asked, "Where is she?" Bridger simply replied, "It was an accident. I crushed her with my car. I don't know where she is." During the arrest, officers described Bridger as being extremely emotional. He was read his rights by the arresting officers, which include the line, "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." But strangely, Bridger was keen to talk. Officers repeated that he didn't have to talk, but he said he wanted to, telling them, "I've been looking for her all day and night on foot. My car is in the garage. It is a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. I didn't abduct her. I tried my best to revive her, then panicked. I only knew her name this morning when I saw the news on the television. I just wish I could remember where I'd put her. There was no life in her. She was just on the seat. I want to say sorry to the family." Bridger was taken to the nearest police station in Aberystwyth. Meanwhile, back at April's hometown, police units including dogs, search teams, and volunteers and mountain rescue continued to search every inch of the Welsh countryside to discover April's whereabouts, all without success, despite the best efforts of everyone involved. Hundreds of volunteers from all over the country stayed out all night, slept for a few hours, and then continued their search, along with the emergency service personnel working just as hard and with equal determination. Over 600 messages had been sent to the police from people suggesting places to search and offering their services. As a result, the police had plenty of volunteers to help them with the search, and thanks to local knowledge, they had over 20 different locations they had to search thoroughly. Sometimes the public get in the way of this kind of investigation, but local knowledge in rural areas such as this is crucial, and the police needed all the help they could get by now. Mark Bridger was now in custody and being questioned by detectives. Strangely, for a man in his position, he wasn't hesitant to talk. Quite the opposite. He spoke very openly about what had happened from the word go.
"I don't know where she is. Yesterday, I came down to see my daughter's teacher. She had a parents' evening. And I then parked up opposite my girlfriend's house, which I believe is not far away from April's mother and father's house. Stupid. I'd had a few to drink, and there was 2 girls on their bikes. I remember the dark-headed girl came behind the car. I looked to see where the other girl was, and I couldn't see this other little girl. And the next minute, the bike was there.
Bridger never denied that he was in the area at the time and admitted that he did hit April with his car while under the influence of alcohol as April was riding her bike. Mark Bridger claims that he knew what a mistake he had made, but maintains that he didn't ever intend to hurt April. Instead, he insists that he drove away with her in his car because he wanted to get her medical attention as soon as possible.
And that's when I realised
It's okay, Mark.
the colour had gone out of her.
Okay,
Her
right.
lips were purple. Paul and Coral are friends of mine. And I've killed their daughter.
An emotional Bridger then freely admits that April Jones died as the result of his actions that night, even stating that her parents were friends of his. But after this admission, Bridger's memory seems to take a turn for the worse. So far, he had been very forthcoming about his involvement. In fact, it was probably the easiest confession these officers had ever extracted from anyone. However, after the confession, Bridger suddenly can't remember anything about what he did with April's body. The police tried to probe him repeatedly, but Bridger's sudden bout of amnesia would not shift.
And I'm in my house, and she's not there. Been upstairs, and I can't find her. I wouldn't have ditched her. I know that. I wouldn't have. I'd have put her somewhere.
The police so far had been very delicate with Mark Bridger. He had been very upfront with them. Aggressive questioning could cause him to clam up, but now they begin to doubt his sincerity. The police knew the chances of Bridger's memory having a blank spot at the crucial time of April's body disappearing, well, it was very unlikely. The detectives questioned Bridger, turning up the heat. He was clearly hiding something, but he continued to stick to his story, becoming even more emotional. The police even began to question whether April was actually dead or not. Could they really believe a word that Mark Bridger was saying? On the Tuesday, the day Bridger had been brought in, police decided to let him have the stage to tell his version of the events. But on Wednesday, detectives saw it as an opportunity to extract further information from him.
And you tell me that when you get out of your vehicle, that you look underneath the vehicle and you see April?
Yes.
Bridger maintained that he ran April over, but the police had a witness, April's 7-year-old friend, who said that April was just fine and had entered Bridger's car happily and was smiling. What 7-year-old would lie like that? The truth is, they wouldn't, nor would they have any reason to.
We have a witness that was present. This person says April got into the Land Rover via the driver's door, which on a normal car would be the right-hand side, but that's really the passenger side door on your car.
That is complete fabrication and lies. It can't have happened.
Bridger's tone changed. He clearly had no idea that the police had a witness who saw everything, albeit a 7-year-old witness. He was visibly agitated by the revelation that his version of events was being contradicted. But whatever his emotional state, Bridger was not folding under any of the questioning techniques. His version of events remained firm, and he was not budging an inch. The detectives now took an unusual step. They brought in a man named Dr. Joe Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is well known for being one of the world's leading experts in criminal body language and behavior. Dr. Sullivan wasn't just going to watch the interviews with Bridger. He visited his home as well to build a psychological profile. He wanted to know everything about this man. What he discovered shocked him. Bridger had a shotgun above the fireplace, handcuffs, knives, both displayed and hidden around the home, and to top it off, he worked at an abattoir. Dr. Sullivan said Bridger was a fantasist, someone who believed himself to be a Rambo-type character. In other words, he didn't live in the real world. Against the advice of Dr. Sullivan, police decided to try a paternal route in their questioning. Bridger had 6 children of his own, after all. Bridger was not changing his story. Their last hope now lay with the forensic teams who were going through Bridger's home in meticulous detail. The teams at the home did come up with something. They located tiny spots of blood in the bathroom. But this could have been anyone's blood. Perhaps Bridger had cut himself while he was shaving. At this point, the police simply didn't know. The samples were taken to a laboratory, but it could take up to 24 hours to get the results back. Having been brought in by the police, then having his advice ignored by them, Dr. Sullivan now presented to the police what he felt Bridger really was.
He was unlikely to experience an enormous amount of empathy or have any major sense of guilt about what he had done. Of course, he will inevitably try to present himself as someone who does have those characteristics, but the sense that I had from the information we had gathered even at that time was that this is a man who is not going to respond to an appeal to his better nature.
Dr. Sullivan said there was no point in trying to appeal to Bridger's better nature. He didn't have one and wasn't going to respond to any pleas from the police regarding guilt, empathy, or remorse. Taking Dr. Sullivan's advice on board, the police now upped the pressure on Bridger. They immediately rearrested him on suspicion of murder. The shock was startling. Bridger went as white as a sheet. On top of this, police had discovered indecent images of minors on his laptop. He was again rearrested for possessing indecent images of children. The net was tightening. Bridger now believed the police had more evidence than he had been told about. Bridger may have been losing his grip on the situation, but this was no consolation to the parents of April. On the Thursday, 3 days after April had vanished on that fateful Monday evening, they were now told that police had given up any hope of finding April alive.
it's not a abduction case anymore, it's a murder. And you've got to tell your children they've lost a baby sister. You're getting told that your daughter's dead, but they don't know where she is. And that was the hardest thing.
The police, of course, did not tell Bridger any of this information, but they also decided to tell the many volunteers who had worked so hard to try and find April that it was time for them to go home and to leave it to the professionals. This request went down badly, as many hundreds of volunteers who had worked so hard went home with nothing to show for their efforts, many of them in tears as they left the area. Friday, 4 days after April had gone missing, police search teams were still out in force searching everywhere they could think of. Forensic teams had found no evidence that Bridger murdered April. But crucially, after examining his car thoroughly, there was also zero evidence that Bridger's story had any truth to it at all. There wasn't a single scratch on his Land Rover.
Our forensics guys have examined the vehicle. Okay. I'm advised that there is no trace of any blood, there is no trace of any hair, no trace of any skin.
If April had been injured, as Bridger said, there should have been some evidence on or inside the car, marks on the bumper or hair or blood inside the vehicle. But there was nothing. Bridger tries to explain this by saying he didn't see any blood on April after she was hit by his car. A young girl gets run over and apparently has no open wounds anywhere on her body. But his story, the fun and games he had been having with the police, was about to be exposed for the sham it really was. At 6:15 in the evening on Friday, the lab finally contacted the detectives. They had compared blood spatters taken from Bridger's bathroom with the DNA taken from April's toothbrush. They were a match. The DNA was also found on the collar of Bridger's fleece and inside a pair of jogging bottoms he had been wearing. Previously, the police did not have enough evidence to charge Bridger, but now they did. The police now had to confront Bridger about the images found on his laptop. Despite probing and showing him the images, even asking him to describe them, he denied that these gave him any pleasure whatsoever. Without going into too much detail, the images found depicted the exploitation, manipulation, and sexualization of children. No right-thinking person would ever have something like this on their computer or even in their possession. Even when confronted with his internet search history, Bridger denied looking for illegal websites for his own gratification. By Saturday, Bridger had been in custody for 3.5 days. The 96 hours was nearly up for the police to question him. It was time to decide whether Bridger would be charged, which was a decision for the Crown Prosecution Service, but not before they had tried one more time to get him to tell the truth.
You can tell me where she is, but you won't. You know where the body is. You know where she is. Did you intend to murder her?
No.
Blood has been found on the wall of the bathroom at your house.
Right.
And this blood gives a full DNA profile of April Jones.
The only explanation I've got is obviously if I've got blood on my hands, if I haven't dried my hands, you flick your hands, I've gone for a wee.
Now, this was his biggest inconsistency yet. He had clearly stated there was not any blood on him or April, nor had any been found in the car. Again, with his story looking weaker by the second, Bridger sticks to his line and says there must have been some blood after all. Police pressed and pressed Bridger on the issue of the images found on his laptop. By now, the police were running low on techniques to try to get him to tell the truth, but this was their only play. But Bridger maintains he has no interest in children.
Were you masturbating to these photographs?
No.
Is this a build-up? Is this what was happening that morning? A build-up of sexual frustration, maybe?
Why hasn't it built up before then?
Maybe the opportunity hasn't arisen.
Or maybe it's just shit.
Finally, the police had found a way to get under Bridger's skin. The mild-mannered, politely spoken, calm individual was disintegrating in front of their eyes. His voice became louder, and he even started swearing. It was clear that he did not like being portrayed as a pedophile. It had taken some time, but the police had finally dug down beneath the surface and discovered the real Mark Bridger. The police had no doubts that they had their man and had already referred the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS. Just over an hour after the final interview with Bridger had finished, the CPS finally gave the police the go-ahead to charge Bridger with the kidnap and murder of April Jones. As the charges were read out to him, he didn't even flinch. There was no emotion or remorse at all. Bridger was given a warm welcome as his prison van arrived at the courts. Angry members of the public shouted abuse at him, while others even threw objects at the van. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic teams continued to work at Bridger's home, finding more and more traces of April's blood. Bone fragments were also found in the fireplace, but due to their state of decomposition, no one could determine if they were April's or not. On the 30th of May 2013, 47-year-old Mark Bridger was found guilty of the abduction and murder of April Jones. The judge, Mr. Justice Griffith Williams, described him as a pathological liar and said, "There is no doubt in my mind that you are a pedophile who has for some time harbored fantasies about young girls." The judge said that he did not believe April Jones was specifically targeted, but that Bridger was on the prowl for a young girl. April Jones was tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams had no hesitation in handing down a whole life term to Bridger, never to be released. Even throughout his court case, Bridger maintained that April had died in what he described as a terrible accident when she was hit by his car. Bridger had long since lost any credibility with the police or the courts. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was no way he was going to escape justice. April Jones was just a normal little girl, doing what any child does, playing outside with her friend, when she was set upon by one sick individual. Despite her illness, she was blossoming into a child who had received glowing school reports from her teachers. No doubt she would have had much to give to the world had she been given the chance. April's family, though utterly heartbroken, said that the trial that they were happy Bridger would never be released from prison and would never be able to hurt any more children. The body of April Jones was never found. 17 bone fragments were discovered in Bridger's home, but none could be attributed directly to April. As the result of their daughter being killed, April's parents lobbied the government and large internet search engines, Google and Bing, to change the way people can search for illegal material. As a result, the internet giants modified their systems to flag anyone searching for this kind of material, and also aim to block or shut down any websites of that nature. We at Beyond Evil hope that April's family and friends will be able to rebuild their lives as best they can, but there will always be an April-shaped hole in their hearts that can never be replaced. A funeral service took place for April in her hometown on the 26th of April 2013. Rest in peace, April Jones. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment down below your take on it, and subscribe to the channel. Also hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new, shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.